In August 1966, a chilling discovery on a remote hill in Brazil sparked one of the strangest unsolved mysteries of the 20th century. Two men, dressed in suits and raincoats, lay dead side by side, their eyes covered by crude lead masks. Beside them, a cryptic note with instructions to swallow capsules and await the mask signal, a water bottle, and a pair of wet towels. Were they victims of a bizarre experiment, a deadly hoax, or something otherworldly? In this video, we'll unravel the eerie details of the lead masks case, a puzzle that's baffled investigators, fueled UFO theories, and left the world questioning what really happened on Vintem Hill. But before we jump in, the details in this video are disturbing and may not be suitable for all audiences, so viewer discretion is strongly advised. As always, remember to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on post notifications to stay up to date with the channel. Alright, let's dive into the video. On August 20th, 1966, Jorge de Costa Alves, then 18 years old, was traveling to Vintem Hill to fly his kite. The stink of decay from a patch of weeds farther up the slope hit him halfway up. Jorge hurried down the hill to get the police after he saw two bodies lying side by side in the mud from a distance. Due to the difficult terrain and the rainy weather, it took the police another 24 hours to get to the bodies. When they got there, they were met with an odd sight. Two men in their 30s, dressed in similar suits and raincoats, were found dead. A pair of identical lead-eye masks were placed next to their heads. For 3 days, the remains had been left out in the open, subject to the hot, muggy Brazilian climate. There was no indication that the men had been attacked as far as the coroner could tell. They appeared to be in excellent health. It was as if they had simply laid down and passed away without any obvious cause. The situation was already peculiar enough, and searching their pockets turned up some rather confusing evidence. Two driver's licenses identified the unfortunate duo as Miguel José Viana, 34, and Manuel Pereira de Cruz, 32. They came from Campos dos Goitacazes, which is roughly 200 kilometers northeast of Rio, and were TV and radio repairmen. Both guys were well liked in their community, married, and had children. There was no reason why anyone would want to hurt them. But the first thing that came into anyone's mind was, why were they on the hill? A few mysterious hints were provided by a number of their possessions. The masks that give this mystery its name are important to it. When you hear lead masks, these seem to serve no practical purpose. It is the lead version of the sleep masks, except it does not have the rear strap. Roughly carved from a thin sheet of pure lead, they looked handcrafted. The men would not have been able to see anything if they had been wearing these blindfolds with jagged edges when they passed away. Were the masks used in a gangland execution? If so, why not just wear a blindfold made of ordinary cloth rather than one made of pure lead? Because of this, several people theorized that the two were wearing these masks to shield their eyes from radiation. But why not cover their whole body if that were the case? When exposed to radiation, industrial personnel typically wear much heavier equipment that completely covers their heads. Then what? We'll get back to the strange masks later, so put a pin in that. A tiny notebook discovered in one of the men's suit coats was the next clue, which further added to the confusion. It had a string of odd alphanumeric characters in it. On online forums, strangers have speculated that these patterns might contain secret coded messages. The much more realistic explanation is that they were a shopping list of electrical components for their radio and TV repair company. However, there was one page that defied this explanation. The last entry written in the notebook was 4:30 p.m., be at the determined place. 6:30 p.m., swallow capsules. After effect, protect metals. Await signal, mask. Some people have described this, which isn't precisely the most logical English, as take capsules. Once you've experienced the effects, wear lead masks to cover half of your face and wait for the signal. According to this entry, the men may have planned to meet someone atop the hill after taking some strange capsules on the day of their deaths. According to one source, Miguel and Manuel had also been taking these pills in the week before the incident, after meals, and before bed, based on earlier entries in the notebook. Furthermore, some specialists in police handwriting concluded that none of the deceased men wrote the schedule. It's quite challenging to verify this assertion, though, because of the inconsistent reporting. The investigators never bothered to follow up on the mystery capsules, which were undoubtedly the best lead they were expected to receive. The cadavers were never examined by toxicologists. According to historical accounts, the coroner was just too busy to care. Yes, it seems that two young men who had died and were lying inexplicably on a hill weren't given attention. The police left it at that, as there was no concrete proof of foul play. No drugs Miguel and Manuel consumed that day, or were coerced into taking, were ever found. According to some narratives from the years that followed, the bodies were subsequently dug up for examination, but their inside organs were completely decomposed by then. There were more questions than answers when the scene was searched. The men were taking capsules, but why? Who were they meeting, if anyone? Which signal was agreed upon? Detectives spoke with the men's families in Campos to put the puzzle pieces together. Miguel and Manuel informed their wives that they were going south to pick up electrical components early on Wednesday, August 17th. According to other stories, they also planned to purchase a used vehicle. Though its precise value was impossible to ascertain due to inflation, they brought about 3 million Brazilian cruzeiros with them. It was approximately $1,350, according to the best estimate. Only around 5% of that amount was left when their bodies were found. The two men got off the bus into the rain at 2 p.m. when they reached Niterói. They purchased matching raincoats at a clothing store near the bus stop, which was their initial destination. They might have purchased the towels that were later discovered soaking in a bag close to their bodies from this location as well. They reportedly went to an electronics store after that, before going to a bar across Guanabara Bay in the heart of Rio de Janeiro. The glass bottle of water they later discovered next to them was purchased there. Miguel's pocket had a receipt that suggested they had originally intended to return, and that they could have redeemed a deposit for the bottle. They were nervous, according to the waitress who gave them water. Miguel looked at his watch obsessively, as though he was afraid of missing something crucial. The two men started climbing the slope around 3:15 p.m. According to other reports, they were given a ride by two unidentified men in a 4x4. In any case, they arrived at their destination soon after. The reason Miguel and Manuel were on Bintem Hill was still unclear, even with the timing of events. It was implied that they had a secret mission beyond simply gathering supplies, because neither of them had been totally truthful with their family. As usual, theories started when there was no factual evidence was presented. Some speculated that Miguel and Manuel had met in secret on the hill, possibly to buy illegal goods. This varied from radioactive substances to illegally obtained foreign electrical components. Some rare electrical components were difficult to obtain in Brazil at the time, leading to a thriving smuggling trade. They might have been involved in such a transaction because they were devoted enthusiasts who were well known for building their own do-it-yourself devices. However, why were they taking capsules if they were only meeting with a supplier? The men would have required much more protection than thin lead eye covers if they had been working with radioactive material. This theory was ultimately ruled out when tests on their hair follicles revealed no signs of radiation exposure. If the idea of underground radioactive transactions seems unrealistic, it is nothing compared to the next direction the research would take. Even if the case's detectives had already started to entertain outlandish conspiracy theories, things got stranger as they learned more. This is because Miguel and Manuel were more than just fans of electronics. They were part of something far more peculiar. This is where the story takes a turn, when Elcio Gomez, a commercial pilot and one of their acquaintances, enters the story. He was arrested a year after their murders because of inconsistent statements he made. It was believed that Elcio Gomez had helped Manuel with his homemade scientific experiments. His widow remembered that a few days before the incident, the two had a falling out. But Elcio had an alibi. He was in a town 4 hours away with some friends. However, Elcio disclosed shocking new information during his second interrogation. He said that he, Miguel, and Manuel belonged to a covert electrical hobbyist group. There were hundreds or even thousands of people involved, so this was not a tiny group. Their mission? Contacting extraterrestrial life on Mars. The case took an even more bizarre turn after this discovery. Did Miguel and Manuel really try to make contact with aliens? Were they members of a little-known cult that killed them? And what precisely took place that evening on Vintem Hill? These tech-savvy UFO hunters experimented with more than just radios and telescopes. They also frequently went to seances, because they thought they could call forth higher spirits from the afterlife. It should come as no surprise that they were huge drug addicts. The case shifted from a logical riddle to a full-fledged paranormal supposition when investigators looked deeper. As we move forward with our video, please note that a lot of the material about this case is based on tabloid misinformation and conspiracy theories before we get any deeper into the bizarre realm of Brazilian UFO cults. One such UFO report for the night of the two technicians' deaths on Vintem Hill was filed shortly after their bodies were discovered. Gracinda Barbosa Coutinho de Souza made an odd accusation and went to the police. While driving her kids home that evening, she told them she had noticed a strange object floating above the hill. It had a vivid, flaming ring around the margins of an orange oval shape. The odd, ghostly light was hovering over the hill's summit. It was gone by the time her husband came back to look at it. Following the announcement, several other locals came forward to report seeing the same phenomenon. As is all too often the case, the news had to break before they stepped forward. Their claims are put into doubt by the tendency for people to remember seeing weird objects only after hearing about someone else's sighting. According to one report, Miguel had informed his sister that he had a significant mission coming up, but it was top secret in the days before their fateful night. The enigmatic light craft, was this meant to be a direct encounter with alien beings? The more plausible explanation is that the light Mrs. de Souza saw was the result of tests the two men were doing on the hill. Miguel and Manuel were used to risky acts in their pursuit of extraterrestrial contact, after all. 2 months before their deaths, the two had constructed a device in Miguel's backyard, according to their accomplice, Elcio Gomez. Their goal? To communicate with aliens. Unfortunately, before they could get any small green men on the wire, it exploded. Whatever actually happened, Miguel and Manuel were ardent believers, and that much is clear. It was probably something to do with UFOs, whatever they were doing on Vintem Hill that evening. Another lead mask death? The events that transpired on Vintem Hill that evening might not have been the first attempt at contact with extraterrestrial life. A journalist from Rio claimed to have discovered another unresolved case in 1967 that indicated these scientific spiritualists like to carry out their strange experiments on higher ground. Hermes Luis Feitosa was discovered dead on Cruzeiro Hill, approximately 3.5 hours east of Campos, 4 years before the deaths of Miguel and Manuel. He worked as an electronics technician, just like Miguel and Manuel. Strangely enough, a homemade lead mask was also discovered with him. This man was probably killed by the same thing that killed Miguel and Manuel. Is it possible that Miguel and Manuel knew Hermes? They were most likely members of the same secret club. They died under almost the same conditions, had comparable histories, and had similar hobbies after all. They might have belonged to the same club even though they didn't know him personally. To communicate with members across the country, Gomez claimed that Miguel and Manuel kept a covert radio communication center in their hometown. If such were the case, the ritual they tried that evening might have been a standard procedure for their clandestine organization. If this is the case, Hermes most certainly swallowed the identical mysterious capsules that were discovered close to Miguel and Manuel's remains. But what were those capsules? According to Gomez, psychedelics were thought to open the mind to a greater spectrum of frequencies, making them a valuable tool for making contact with extraterrestrials. Of course, this assertion is completely unsupported by scientific data. Similar to thinking that déjà vu is a message from another dimension, the notion that psychedelics facilitate communication with aliens is intriguing, but unsupported by science. When under the influence of drugs, your brain is not talking with aliens, it's just your drugged-out head. All of this would initially appear to be a bunch of science fiction that Elcio Gomez made up to deceive investigators. But Miguel's statements were backed up by strong evidence that investigators discovered in his home workshop. Among the things they found were a pair of waste lead and metal snips that are the same thickness as the masks, a book with highlighted passages about scientific spiritualism, a powerful brilliance that might blind humans will be released by any summoned alien spirit, according to one emphasized paragraph. With the lead masks present, this element was really unsettling. The case takes an even more bizarre turn after learning this information. Were Miguel and Manuel trying to make contact with aliens? Did they belong to a broader cult-like movement that was preoccupied with fusing spirituality and technology? Even if there are still a lot of unsolved problems, one thing is certain: this was no typical mishap. Elcio could have provided a half-decent explanation for the weird lights on the hill. It wouldn't have been the first time Miguel and Manuel had persuaded onlookers that they were seeing visitors from the stars if they were the result of an experiment. Charles Bowen of the Flying Saucer Review wrote an article about the case in 1967 that went into greater detail about Elcio Gomez's claims, including another explosive episode that occurred the summer before his buddies were killed. Miguel asked him to observe their most recent experiment on June 13, 1966. He met with other locals on Atafona Beach, which is east of Campos. On the beaches, Miguel and Manuel put up their homemade instruments, albeit there are no thorough descriptions of them. Elcio Gomez claimed to have seen a brightly luminous object descending over the neighboring water shortly after turning it on. The odd craft then exploded over the sea after shooting back up into the air. According to reports, the explosion was felt almost 10 miles away. The Brazilian Air Force and Navy reportedly became interested in Manuel and Miguel's tests shortly after, according to Flying Saucer Review. This does not, however, necessarily demonstrate the validity of their work. Government organizations will undoubtedly take note if you begin constructing explosive devices in your garden and firing them into the air. According to a cursory review of Brazilian UFO accounts, this was not a unique occurrence. When a UFO burst over Ubatuba Beach in 1957, a guy allegedly gathered pieces of pure magnesium and delivered them to a reporter. Although these assertions were never confirmed, it's plausible that scientific spiritualists were taking part in comparable practices. Perhaps many of these alleged UFO sightings were truly the result of their attempts to communicate with extraterrestrial species. The lights on Vintem Hill could only be explained in two ways. Either Miguel and Manuel were behind it, perhaps launching a balloon or beacon, or the whole thing was a hoax. Before we continue on, if you are enjoying the video so far, please remember to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. And if you don't like it, let me know down in the comments. Your support truly means everything. Alright, back to the video. According to some, the two men intended to ritually end their lives. It's reasonable to suppose that they consumed lethal drugs in an attempt to transcend their bodily selves, given their New Age ideals. Brazilian authorities threw a curveball into the case just when it appeared that the inquiry was almost over. Gordon Crichton wrote a follow-up for Flying Saucer Review in 1969, presenting a revised official account of the events based on Brazilian newspaper clippings. A confession from one of the murderers was obtained by the police, according to Correio do Povo, February 22, 1969. Flying Saucer Review readers were disappointed to learn that the authorities had captured a very human criminal, rather than an extraterrestrial assassin. The infamous smuggler Hamilton Bizani was the murderer of Miguel and Manuel. Bizani admitted to a relative earlier that year that he had shared some of the blame. He was already serving a 50-year term for smuggling when the authorities interviewed him at a prison in São Paulo. The seasoned criminal told the whole truth since he had nothing left to lose. Bizani was hiding in a safe house in Rio de Janeiro while evading the law when three associates, Wilson Almio, Acasio, and Espanhol, called him. With a payoff big enough to keep him hidden for months, they offered him a kill job in Niterói. He agreed. The group first took a taxi to Niterói before transferring to a stolen vehicle. They were headed to a suburban spiritualist center where they would locate their prey. The center's manager, Helena, who had initially employed the gang, led the session. Miguel and Manuel were among those present. Their accomplices indicated the presence of the targets as the gang entered the room. It is unclear what happened next, but Miguel and Manuel were eventually killed, either by coercion or they were forced into consuming the mysterious capsules discovered at the scene. This discovery gave an already strange case a new dimension by implying that the killings were a planned assassination rather than an accident or ritual. Whether this theory holds up remains uncertain, but it provides an alternative explanation to the theories of interdimensional beings and psychedelic overdoses. There are various conflicts in the idea that the two men were murdered by the smugglers group. Why would they leave any cash on the bodies if robbery was their intention? According to witness reports, men were spotted by themselves on the slope. There were no signs of a scuffle at the crime scene either. Instead of conducting an in-depth inquiry, it appeared more plausible that law enforcement was eager to wrap up the case. The idea that the men had managed to make direct touch with aliens was among the more lurid beliefs. According to this idea, they were executed by extraterrestrial powers because their experiments had interfered with an alien spacecraft. It seems inconceivable that aliens would require human criminals to carry out an assassination. The theory that the men were involved in the unlawful smuggling of radioactive materials is a more credible conspiracy scenario. The missing money could be the result of a poorly executed transaction, but it seems doubtful that they could afford to buy radioactive material for $1,300. This could indicate that their intention to die that day was clear. This idea would account for the mysterious capsules and the crime scene's undisturbed condition. Maybe the two men thought they had been selected because they were under the impression that they were actually communicating with spirits or aliens while high on LSD. They may have believed they were accepting an invitation to transcend into the spirit realm or join aliens on Mars. Anyone familiar with cults will recognize this suicide motive. Regarding the lost money, wouldn't you want to spend some cash beforehand if you were going to die? You can't take it with you after all. Perhaps they used the funds to buy things for their ceremony, possibly even lethal dosages of medications to help them transfer. They should have sought a better supplier if they truly spent all of their money on a few capsules, especially if they never meant for the poisons to kill them. This seems like the most plausible scenario. Given that Miguel and Manuel were family men, and that there were other indications that they intended to descend from the hill at some point, it is probable that they overdosed while trying to have another extraterrestrial contact session. It is possible that they were exposed to the environment while under the effect of hallucinogens. The 1960s saw new psychedelic substances entering the world's markets, and Brazilian UFO paranoia was as severe as Roswell's. Pseudoscience dominated the understanding of these medications' effects while actual science trailed behind. Suddenly, the New Age spiritualist toolset included a variety of crazy new chemicals. These elements transformed a straightforward unintentional death into one of the most unusual mysteries in the annals of true crime. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, then check out these videos on the screen now. If you have a topic suggestion, please send it to the email in the description. And as always, remember to like, comment, share the video, and subscribe to our channel. And remember, the only thing scarier than these stories is missing out on our next video.